Welcome back to Shropshire Business Live TV. We are live here in the theatre at Pressfield School in Shrewsbury in front of an audience today. Give us a round of applause, folks, for our panel. We're about to introduce Richard Sheehan from Shropshire Chamber, Hollie Whittles wearing one of her many hats for the Federation of Small Businesses, and Graham Guest, Principal and Chief Executive at Telford College, but also the Skills Champion at the Marches Let. That's right, isn't it, Graham?
It is, thank you, Col.
Skills and recruitment, Glyn was touching on it as we were just talking about it earlier, but Richard, I mean, the Chamber does a quarterly survey as well, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why are businesses finding it so hard to recruit staff at the moment in the Chamber's opinion?
I think we heard from Glyn there that there are a number of different factors, but it gets wider than that. I think the pandemic has definitely changed people's relationship with the workplace in many cases. We've seen many examples of vacancies that people have struggled to fill because they can't accommodate a work from home environment. And that's become something which is much more important to many people. It may not quite be so now, the energy price is what it is and you've got to heat your house, but nevertheless it changed the whole attitude towards work and the workplace. So that really had a bearing. Glyn touched on the migrant labour issue here in Shropshire with the sectors that we have representing around agriculture, tourism, leisure, hospitality. They've been hit really, really hard by the loss of migrant labour. There's no question about that, and we've been flagging that up for well over a year, but sadly we are still where we were. So progress needs to happen, and it needs to happen quite quickly.
And Hollie, as Glyn also said, you know, Shropshire very heavily biased towards small businesses, and they have their own particular problems from this point of view, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. Like the FSB have found 78% of those small businesses are really struggling to recruit. They just can't find the right staff with the right skills at the right place at the right time. And, you know, as Richard said, we've got an ageing population in the Marches, we're a rural area, and businesses are being hit with all sorts of rising costs. So, you know, recruitment on top of that is a massive problem.
Graham, what sort of tools then can education help to provide businesses with to help them on this way? And, you know, I know, you know, there's a lot of campaigns at the moment for businesses to work more closely with education than they ever have before. So you're out there talking to businesses, aren't you? And what are they telling you about?
Absolutely. We work incredibly closely with both Richard and Hollie. Hollie's a great supporter of the college. I mean, we, as a college, we've seen a change. I mean, we've been successful in recruiting all of our teaching staff, but you know it's a struggle for other staff recruiting. So we feel everybody's pain. I think what we're beginning to see, the first time in 30 odd years in education, some businesses, those that can have the capacity to begin to think further ahead. You know, we're talking to a number of businesses that are saying we need to now project 5 years. They're talking to us, can we work with the schools for a pipeline through school, college, university? I think that's really positive. We do, I mean, Hollie's a great ambassador for the college. I'm not saying that because Hollie's here, but, you know, work experience, apprenticeships, there's a plethora of opportunities for employers to get involved at the moment. But I would imagine for many employers, and you know, we've got employer hubs. They need that person now, you know, and education can't always provide that. You can't suddenly find a well-trained trained machinist to operate tomorrow. But there's lots of initiatives going on, and I'm sure Richard will talk about the latest one that sees education and business come even closer together to meet this challenge.
Richard, are there specific sectors that are really needing some support now?
All of them.
All of across the board?
Virtually all of them. Like Hollie's survey, our research has shown locally 76% of those responding struggle to recruit. It is a major issue, but I think that the whole ethos in terms of recruitment has changed. Only recently, it's taken a long time for businesses to realise that actually they've got to sell themselves now because it is such a tight labour market. It's almost a reversal. We're in a situation where no longer do people apply for a job and they get interviewed and they go in and they have to sell themselves. It's actually turned around the other way.
It seems to me candidates give you a counter offer sometimes as an employer these days, don't they? So, well, that's what you're offering me. Let's see if there's any movement on this.
Well, you're absolutely right, and I think that can be about the actual physical workplace and the environment within it. But touching on the environment, it's another issue that's actually impacting on people's decision making. Some businesses now have to make sure they have a very clear and transparent environmental policy to ensure they attract particularly young people who see that as really, really important now. If you can't demonstrate that you're focusing very much on reducing your carbon footprint and you're involved in reducing sort of impact on environment, you're going to struggle to recruit somebody who that will probably be quite important to. So the whole sort of the way of recruiting has turned on its head, and that's not going to change anytime soon, because, as I've said right from the beginning, we've not seen any major significant changes. I think one issue we might see, and I think Glyn touched on the economically inactive. You know, a lot of people decided through COVID and when they were in a situation where they were furloughed that actually, you know what, I can manage in a different way. I've probably got just about enough to get by, and I'm going to be in that. I'm going to stay at home and I'm going to potter around and do other things. But the inflationary pressures that are coming in now are starting to get people to look slightly differently at that, and you know what, this might not be quite as comfortable as I thought, and so there is an opportunity for businesses to bring back into the workplace some of these termed economically inactive who took that decision primarily because they could do it. Now, doing that, of course, is going to have to demonstrate flexibility. Businesses are going to have to recognise these people, again, their relationship with the workplace has changed, and therefore they need to find different ways of actually working with these people and supporting these people, so that it's almost a case of, well, this is how I'd like it to be. Okay, we'll find a way of making that be.
Because there's actually, isn't there, probably, there's a lot of people, they're not completely economically inactive. They're sort of 50-50, aren't they? They've decided maybe they don't want to work full-time anymore, or they only want to work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. And Holly, for small businesses, that's hard, isn't it, to sort of accommodate sometimes people's particular work patterns that they request.
Especially if you're a small business and you're already locked into a tenancy, for example. So you've still got to turn the lights on, the electric on, whether there's one person or 20 people sitting in that room. So it's a very fine balance trying to open it out for hybrid working or working from home, whilst also you've still got these business costs coming in. And, you know, we've just been negotiating a lease where they wanted to put our lease up by 50%. Our energy prices for the electric for the building have gone up by triple. So that's massive things, as well as I'm having to now say you can work from home, then you've got to kit them out for working at home as well, because you're still responsible for their health and well-being. So it's a real challenge.
And as a percentage of the overall turnover of a small business, that's a much bigger chunk, isn't it?
Yes.
Graham, do you think there's a piece of work that needs to be done to encourage people to stay in Shropshire, to show young people, the next generation of the workforce, that actually it's all here on the doorstep? They don't need to leave Telford, Shrewsbury, Oswestry, Bridgnorth to go and do what they want to do. You know?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Shropshire's this like the world's best kept secret in a way, isn't it? But sometimes it's too secretive, and we've got some fantastic companies. Richard and I were only talking yesterday afternoon actually about some of the fascinating companies that are hidden, and I don't think people realise. It's a great place to live, and it's just promoting those opportunities for young people and adults to stay here and train and progress, because it is a great place to work, and there's some fascinating companies over the whole of Shropshire.
You're from the Chamber, Richard, obviously, and you're Graham from the college, at Telford College. How are you working together to plug any skills gaps?
Well, Graham touched on it earlier on, that the Department of Education issued a contract recently for the Local Skills Improvement Plan, as they've termed it, which is effectively giving business a voice in shaping the curriculum going forward. It's always had a voice. Fortunately, we've got some very good colleges on the patch who engage with business on a regular basis and help to shape the needs. It's a big geography across the Marches. There's an awful lot of people that no matter how much resource people have, they're hard to reach. They need a voice, they need that support and that help. So Graham and I both sit on a board, which is, and Holly indeed, which is driving forward the new skills agenda. And working in collaboration and partnership, we will make sure that that what is available in the future is absolutely what businesses are asking for. The challenge, of course, and the caveat is making sure they know what they need, because of course that is a big challenge short term, particularly with people battening down the hatches a little bit.
Can I just add to that as well? As part of that survey about recruitment and skills, we also found that only 17% of businesses are actually engaging with schools and colleges. So I think sometimes small businesses are just leaving it to the big business to speak for them. So actually we need to encourage businesses through things like the boards to actually speak up and communicate what they actually need and what they want. Because especially when Ofsted are coming in and looking at things like Gatsby Benchmark 4, which is all about meaningful interaction between business and education. So I think we also, as business owners, need to step up and help bridge that gap between the two.
So from a college's point of view then, Graham, are you wanting more businesses to come and speak to you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we actively work with 500. So, you know, that's not 500 that get a Christmas card, that's 500 that do business with us. But you know, we'd love 1,500. But you know, Hollie's those active businesses, and I understand. I mean, if you're a small business like Hollie, and you say come to a meeting, that's time out of your, you know. Yeah. But the more businesses that engage, I just wanted to go back to Richard's point, because the opportunity, you know, the data that Richard's team will collect working with the businesses it could be a game changer. Without boring everybody, the funding constraints that colleges have don't allow us to support businesses like we should do. Hopefully the information, I'm sure it will allow us to flex that, which will be a game changer for the region. We've already seen that with a project that we're working on, which was working in collaboration with Richard in the NHS, where it's had a significant impact in recruiting healthcare assistants across the whole of the marches. And if we can replicate that in every sector, that will just really help Hollie and all the other businesses in the marches. So it's a great opportunity to see businesses and providers work together.
So Richard, really then, it's important that businesses do get involved in surveys and provide you with data and speak to you guys at the Chamber. Yeah,
we recognise that people are surveyed to death, and so we've got to be mindful of that. But this is absolutely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have a voice in something which will help shape their sector, the business community and the economy of our county. They really, really shouldn't waste it. If you sit on your hands and don't do anything, don't moan, because you've had your chance. And it is so, so important. Over the coming months, people will be engaged by my team and many other teams as well to get them to get involved. And it is absolutely critical that they get involved so that we can make sure that the business community of Shropshire gets the support it needs, that our providers are funded correctly and to the right levels to deliver that support the business needs, because ultimately it's the economy that will take us through this thing.
I was reading a survey earlier this week which suggested 3 areas that are the biggest problem for businesses when it comes to recruiting suitable staff is lack of basic IT skills and lack of basic maths and English. Hollie, would you echo that one?
Absolutely, yeah. And again, we found 48% of businesses are reporting that they need digital skills. And certainly for the area that I'm in, we do data analytics. Maths is the one thing that we recruit for, because you've got to have that statistical brain that likes puzzle and problem solving. So for us, that is a core critical skill. But also I'm looking for other skills. I'm looking for entrepreneurship, creative skills, interpersonal skills. And I think that's something that's lacking in the education system at the moment at schools. They're not getting a chance to be creative. And that's the pivotal point where their brains are wiring and we're snubbing it out of them. So by the time they get to college and university, they're already sort of programmed into a set way of thinking. So I would like to see more of those entrepreneurial skills coming out.
And Graham, things like basic maths and English is a foundation that can just open more doors for people, isn't it, going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sad statistic, isn't it, that, you know, and Jeremy Hunt announced that, you know, they have appointed the SAR to look at maths and English. 48% of our young people still leave school without maths and English. And that's you know, one, it's a massive investment, but, you know, for the economy, that's poor. I mean, we have over 2,000 students post-16. and 700 of them will come to us without maths and English. That's a massive impact for us in terms of finances, but it's a massive impact in terms of moving on to work with companies like Hollie. So we've got a big project in terms of the town centre in Telford in terms of digital and maths, and working with some of the most deprived areas of the region to engage people into maths, both adults and 16 to 18, so we can improve that level, because we all know that the job market is moving to level 3 and above. So without those core skills, we can't support the economy. But there is a piece of work to be done at that, that school level. We work closely with schools, and I really do understand the constraints by which they operate in, and a lot of head teachers would change those constraints if they were able to support businesses more.
Anybody got any questions, observations, anything? Yeah, let's get a microphone over to you. And then introduce yourself and tell the world. I know Graham said we're best kept secret here, but we've got viewers from New York to Bulgaria watching this today, Graham.
Hello, I'm Diane Brown from Tom's Consulting, and we're civil and structural design engineers. And it's very interesting listening to those statistics about the maths and English. And do we know why that there's only that percentage, or the huge percentage, that haven't got the skills? Because that's obviously then got the knock-on effect to the number of teachers that you're going to have teaching maths and English. But also maths is a key skill for our business, and when I left school it was one of the, well, maths and English were the two that you needed to walk away with regardless of what job you went for. So I suppose my question is, do we know why those statistics are so low? Has engagement in the classroom on it changed? Do we need to try and, I don't know, make it more interesting so that they're engaged more? Or is it just the, I don't know, just there is the lack of perhaps teaching staff that therefore it's dropping down?
I couldn't answer that, unfortunately, because I don't come from a school sector. I come from a post-16 sector. So, but I would imagine there's a plethora of, and I don't think that's without schools really trying to do that. I think if there was a head teacher here, they may well say government policy over, doesn't matter the colour of the vote, has consistently changed policy on English and maths. And you only have to work with your son or daughter to know that the delivery of it is changed, and therefore support and that is confusing, I'm guessing. And whereas what you need through any government is consistency. And I know from my sector, policy's changed almost rapidly, without them probably thinking 5-10 years ahead. It's termed on a government, and those policies can change. And I think to really survive, you need a joint party education policy that everybody buys in. No matter what the change in government is, you're going to carry on with it. It is my view. I mean, Richard and I spoke yesterday that the initiative we've got is great, but should there be a change in 12 or 18 months' time, we could be in a different direction, and all that great work could be lost for a different policy.
Yeah.
Richard?
Yeah, I think they're not seen as sexy subjects, are they, anymore? I don't think. I think there's a need in terms of mentoring and to get back to some of the basic disciplines, because they haven't really gone away. I sympathise with schools because they're measured to death and tasked to do certain things, you know, in an ideal world. And let's hope from our skills work that we do now that there'll be something coming out that actually says to the Department of Education, you know what, we need to get businesses and schools much closer together than they are, not just one or two, but a lot. That becomes a challenge in the market town areas. But hopefully when young people hear from business owners and business leaders that you know, maths, science, all these things are still important, then there's some work that can be done to try and encourage them to take more attention to it. We know there's been a challenge in terms of number of teachers, of course, over time, which hasn't helped. And COVID hasn't helped, of course, as well, because Graham will know much more about this than I will, but I'm imagining that remote learning is probably not as effective as face-to-face stuff, I think, and therefore that's going to be starting to manifest itself a little further down the line as we start to get people taking those exams. But business has a part to play in this, and they need to step up and make sure that work experience is exactly that. It's a really good experience. It paints a picture of what the workplace is. You don't sit in the workplace on your mobile phone in the corner doing stuff like that. That's not what it's like. You don't turn up an hour late just because you didn't feel like getting out of bed because it's nice and warm there, and that's not what the world of work is like, not for most anyway. And so consequently, I think there's some real basic education that needs to go back into back in terms of businesses and education establishments working much closer together if we're to fix this.
Hollie, you're nodding along. What are your thoughts?
I think it goes back to, I think businesses have got to get more involved with schools, because they need to explain to children why they're learning maths and what they can then do with it. They just are going through, this is algebra, this is Pythagoras, this is a matrices. They're probably thinking, what am I going to use this for? What's the real world application of learning that? Well, why not teach them about how to set up a pizza business, something that they're interested in? And this is why you need maths, because you need to calculate your cost of sales, you need your profit and your turnover. Apply it to a business scenario. I think they'll then get it. But I think businesses have got to help schools with this.
I think when I did my work experience at school, and which was 26 plus years ago, my first introduction to business was doing 2 weeks of placement just before the summer holidays, and that was it. So there was no interaction really with businesses when I was at school. So I think you're right, it's got to grow, hasn't it?
And I'm an enterprise advisor, so I'm going into schools advising them on this kind of stuff and the strategy. And they get a lot of pushback from senior leadership on allowing students to actually go and do work experience. So one school I work with, sixth form can't do that, they're far too busy. Well, you've got PD days, you've got holidays. So there are definitely times when they can do that work experience. So I think schools need to value the actual going out into work as well and allow them to do it.
I also think as well, probably the final point to mention, we talk about qualifications and how important they are, but it's the softer skills as well. It's the interpersonal skills. It's creating rounded individuals that can walk confidently into a workplace. And as Richard said, in the last 2 years during COVID, and people have been blended learning or isolated at home, the ability to just actually be part of the human race and be confident enough to interact with strangers is overlooked a lot of the time, isn't it? And
they're all stuck on their phones. They don't know how to speak to people anymore.
Somebody said to me many years ago now, and obviously we're heading towards it, that we'll all lose the ability to speak. We'll just squeak, click and make button type noises because of all the technology that we're embracing. And there is no substitute for social interaction and the strength and the benefit that it brings. But I think just going back to the school bit, because I say I do have great sympathy for the schools, because I recognise that they are measured to death on specific things, and so their time, resource and energy to step outside of that and make a more rounded person isn't there. So I'm really hopeful that the LSIP report will come back, and actually part of this will be thrown out, where decision makers and policy makers down in the Westminster bubble will actually get it, that actually, it's not great, what you're doing is broken, it isn't working properly, but you're making it that way, so let's fix it together.
I just to add to what Richard said, we're a qualification measured education system, and every year I will talk to all of our new students, and I will say to them, say if I've got 500 students doing level 3 digital, and their view and their arrival will be, in the main, if I achieve this level 3 programme, I'm going to get a job. And I say to them, but 500 of you are going to get that qualification. So what are you going to add to your CV that makes it that Hollie says, I'm going to employ that person? And I think there's a little bit more of a need, that qualifications are only one tool in the toolbox. No matter how tight the market is, it just makes you more sellable.
Absolutely. Anybody else got any more questions for our panel? before we let them go out into the rain that sounds like it's hammering
It
down
does,
on the roof?
yeah.
Ferocious,
I think
isn't
it
it?
proves we're live though, doesn't it, to be honest?
Yeah.
We're going to be hearing from the new head at Pressfield School after our break in a couple of minutes, but before we do, can we say a big thank you to our panel, to Graham, to Hollie and to Richard. Thank you very much. Back in a minute or so.